Today is the 9th anniversary of the beginning of the South Ossetian War. How would you say the events, that war and the conflict are viewed today?
First of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you and to express my views concerning Georgian reality. I would like to mention that even in 2008, I saw how deep and serious results could bring for Georgia events which had place in South Ossetia and this tragic war. But unfortunately, even that time, people did not understand this, and we remember celebration of the victory. And I would like to say that right now some people in Georgia don't understand reality quite well. They are living under illusion. But I see that after these years after war, situation concerning territorial integrity and situation concerning conflict solution is worse and worse. And I'm very much disappointed that these years Georgia didn't use for solving the problems, just opposite. Many politicians, they are closing eyes on the reality of the problems. Unfortunately, I would like to mention that this tragic 2008 brings so serious problems for Georgia that we can't just create a better possibility for Georgia's future.
Would you say that the Georgian media provides fair and balanced coverage of those events?
No, absolutely not. Of course, it's a little bit more maybe fair than it was during Saakashvili national movement. But nevertheless, I didn't see any realistic investigations, journalist investigation in media, or even some attempts to show pictures from different sides. And for example, when I mentioned that the main problem was that Saakashvili began a war, and Saakashvili was a person who is most responsible in these tragic events, I was declared as just enemy of the country by all medias and all media representatives. And even right now, despite of investigation made by European Union, despite of Taliavini's declaration, despite of the things that everybody knows what really happened, to say that Saakashvili began the war, this is very uncomfortable in Georgia, and nobody wants to stress it and to say this.
And what about the Western media? Do you think that their coverage provides a fair and balanced view on the events of 2008? Do viewers in the West have a more fair, view of what's going on?
No, because the main problem here is another side is the Russia Federation, and right now it's a trend everywhere in the world to blame Russia in everything what Russia made and what Russia did not make. So of course, unfortunately, despite of very provocative actions from the side of Saakashvili many times, Russia used this, and Russian intervention had a place in 2008, and Russia brought Russian military bases back in Georgia, in South Ossetia and Abkhazia, and even still there is a so-called borderization process in the middle of Georgia, which is very painful. But nevertheless, nobody wants to show pictures from two different sides, from what was the fall of Georgian leadership and what Russia made, and how Russia used these unclever and tragic steps made from the side of Saakashvili. Of course, it's very comfortable for Western politicians and for Western media to use this to show Russia in only negative light.
Well, there's a report by a Swiss diplomat, Heidi Tagliavini, where she says that then President Mikhail Saakashvili started the conflict and used against civilians forbidden weapons, including cluster munitions, during his bombing of Tsinkvali. Why hasn't he been prosecuted?
I think it was a political decision of Georgian government, and not only of Georgian government, but from the side of some forces in the West, especially in United States, who supported maybe Saakashvili during his actions in 2008. And even more, sometimes I have a feeling that despite of official position of the United States high officials, there were some very strong forces who maybe just were trying to force Saakashvili or to provoke Saakashvili to begin this war in 2008. You remember that it was a pre-election period in United States, and it was very useful for some aggressive forces in US to use against anti-Russian card in their activity. From another side, of course, I had the feeling, and I had a big hope in 2012 when Georgian Dream came into the power, that they will investigate not only 2008 but other crimes of President Saakashvili and his team, and they will prosecute him, and it might be a very serious step even for solution of relations between Georgians and Ossetians. But I saw that nobody wants a restoration of justice. Nobody wants really to open the files which will show what Saakashvili was doing during his presidency in reality. Maybe it was some kind of pressure from the side of United States. Yes, it was some pressure, but I'm sure that having a real investigation, having a serious investigation, might give us some possibility even for Georgian Dream to show everything to the Western representatives, and to say that you should not protect the person who is doing things like that.
Well, on the topic of Saakashvili's potential return, he has now been stripped of his Ukrainian citizenship. Do you think, or what do you think rather, caused his fall from grace in such a short period of time?
By the way, he is really uncomfortable for the leaders in Ukraine, because country is really corrupted, country is really in trouble, and in opposition, and being in opposition, Saakashvili, of course, quite strong. So I think that he created some kind of threat for today's Ukrainian leadership, or maybe he received some kind of instructions, because I'm absolutely sure that he is a part of some kind of program, what should be done in Ukraine. So he is continuing everything the same what he was doing in Georgia. And of course, again, he could be used from the different forces from the side of West, because they again want to use Ukraine as anti-Russian card in the world political game. Immediately when Saakashvili lost the citizenship of Ukraine, he was in CNN and in BBC and other international media, and all these interviews, the people begin from the words that biggest fighter against Putin, biggest fighter against Russia.
But do you think that Saakashvili's allies during the time of the war, that they too should bear responsibility for what happened?
Nobody shares the responsibility about after August 2008, because it was a general line that nobody is responsible for that, and nobody just paid a price for just beginning of war. Nobody paid a price that people were not evacuated on time. Nobody paid a price that Kodori, for example, the part of Georgia, was the governmental forces left without even one shooting, and so on and so on. There was no investigation. So it means that nobody responded for what happened in 2008 from the side of Georgian political elite.
Well, when the Georgian Dream, the ruling party, when they came to power, they talked about repairing relations with Russia. Have they done anything in that direction?
No, nothing serious. Yes, there are some talks concerning just flights concerning Georgian wine or some agriculture products, but this is not important. What is important to have real serious political dialogue. This is very important. And if you remember, President Putin suggested 3 times that he is ready to meet high-level Georgian officials, president or prime minister, and answer was absolutely tragic. Answer from the side of president was, I will ask my Western colleagues and then I decide to meet Putin or not. This is a tragedy for the country. This means that Georgia is losing its independence. If your president, your prime minister asking permission from the side of US embassy to meet Putin or not, how can we speak about some serious dialogue between these 2 countries? So I can blame Georgian dreams that they lost, let's say, 5 golden years for solving the many problems which exist in front of my country, and they really lose this possibility to speak with Russian president. They didn't use it.
You now have 2 areas of Georgia that have independently been building their own states, their own nations for the past 9 years, arguably much longer. How do you begin to fix the situation? How do you begin to de-escalate and, as you say, unify?
You know, first of all, I would like to stress it very seriously that Georgian and Abkhaz and Georgian Ossetians, we have centuries of history of friendship. And I'm sure that these centuries means a lot. But what is very important is that we should not forget that the pain right now which exists after these tragic events in Abkhazia and so-called South Ossetia, this pain is very strong. But we have to begin to speak with these people. We have to rebuild these bridges which existed during many centuries, and we have to ensure them that being a part of United Georgia will be much more safe and more comfortable for them than to be just separated from western part of Georgia. And these people should have absolutely 100% insurance that nobody in the future will repeat the same what Saakashvili did or what happened in early 90s. This is very important. Of course, I am not naive, and I understand that it will be quite difficult and it's need a lot of time. But I'm sure that if from one side we will begin a direct dialogue with Abkhaz and Ossetians, and from another side we will find a solution in our relations with Russia, this could be possible. But the problem is just Georgian government is losing time, and the time is not working for Georgians. And the situation when we are not using the possibility to have direct dialogue with Russia, it's creating more and more problems on the way of unification, and this is a problem.
Is there any chance, a possibility, that Georgia would recognize Abkhazia and South Ossetia as sovereign states?
No. For me, no. I will never recognize Abkhazia and so-called South Ossetia as an independent states. And I think if any Georgian politician will do this, he will leave the office very, very soon, because despite of the problems, despite of the difficulties which exist in Georgian society, despite of the fact that sometimes there are some just positions when people are really tired because of difficult social and economic life, if you will look very deeply, you will see that for every Georgian and for everybody, Abkhazia and South Ossetia and unification of the country is very important.
Well, just before hostilities broke out, you resigned for temporarily, you paused your political career exactly just before the conflict broke out. Why is that?
Yeah, because I saw that Saakashvili is driving country in wrong direction. After crisis in 2007 and the second elections of Saakashvili, he promised to me that he will change his policy, he will change his internal and international policy, that he will respect democratic values much more than because he was just really violating democratic values very seriously in the country. He promised to me that he will change his position with Russia and with the conflict regions, and he will begin the negotiation process. But I remember quite well April 2008, when we were very near to the war in Abkhazia, and I saw what Saakashvili doing, I saw what the people around him were doing, and what kind of advices they were giving to Saakashvili. I saw that, unfortunately, I will have any kind of mechanisms to avoid very serious problems for the country in the future. And of course, I said to Saakashvili, either you are just doing what you promised, or I will leave, because I don't want to be a part of this process which is bringing my country in absolutely wrong direction and to the very serious problems. That was why I decided to leave.
Well, eventually you came back and you founded the Democratic Movement United Georgia Party. What motivated you to come back?
Only war, because before war I had a very strong decision made for myself that at least few years I will not, I will continue to be somehow out from the political life of Georgia, and I will try I wanted to see what is going on a little bit from the side, to understand the situation, maybe from more just from the side. But when war had place, when happened what happened in 2008, and especially when I saw the reaction of Saakashvili, who was celebrating so-called victory in 2008, when I saw absolutely inadequate reaction from the side of political forces and unfortunately from the side of big part of society, I understood that I have no right to stand on the side. I have obligation in front of my people and even in front of these people who don't understand this and blaming me as a traitor. I have an obligation in front of future generations to do something to change the situation and to survive the country.
During the last elections, you didn't gain any seats, your party didn't gain any seats, while Mikhail Saakashvili's United National Movement gained almost a third of the seats in parliament. Why is that? Are the ideas and the beliefs of Mikhail Saakashvili and his party still popular?
In some part of population, unfortunately, yes, because during these 9 years when Saakashvili was in the power, he was able, using media and using TV, somehow to change the people's mind and views, and it was a very serious propaganda during this period. But he has maximum 15% of support, but he received much more than 20%. And again, this is because of two reasons. One was the reason that again Ivanishvili used the Saakashvili and his forces as a main oppositional force. And the second was, of course, a very serious process of manipulation of elections. And when I'm speaking this, it's quite easy to see the conclusions of ODIHR concerning elections, where ODIHR just mentioned very clearly that counting process of voices was bad or very bad.
Well, you're one of the most recognizable politicians in Georgia. The presidential elections are just around the corner. And in fact, the taxi driver that picked me up and brought me here from the airport, he said if he could, he would have voted for you. You know, very, very big fan. Do you plan on running?
First of all, yes, I'm planning to run for presidential elections, but again, it depends what Georgian Dream will do, because they are changing the legislation. They wanted to change legislation in Georgia and to make Georgia absolutely parliamentary republic. They wanted to elect next president of Georgia not with direct elections, but they wanted to elect Georgian president via parliament, which is, of course, means that somebody will put just any person and just bring him in presidential palace, and this somebody will be Bidzina Ivanishvili if nothing will be changed. But I hope that opposition will be strong enough not to allow Georgian Dream to make such kind of constitutional changes, because it means that Georgia will not just state anymore. It will be some kind of company which will under Ivanishvili's ruling, and this is absolutely not acceptable. So in any case, I'm ready, and I will continue my fight for active political life. There will be presidential elections. I will participate in these elections. There will be next parliamentary elections, and we will participate again, because despite of very serious shock, let's say, after parliamentary elections, our party was only one political party in Georgia among oppositional political parties who just keeps the unity. And next day after parliamentary elections results have been announced, we continue our fight for justice. We continue our efforts to protect our votes, but we were alone, unfortunately, and justice, system of justice in Georgia is so unjust that it was impossible to achieve anything.
What do you change? What's your program? We've heard about your foreign policy aspect, but what about your domestic program? What would you offer the Georgian people?
First of all, of course, the foreign policy is very serious priority for me. And the first what I will do, I will try to have a meeting with President Putin and to begin a very serious negotiation, direct negotiation with Russia. And of course, one of the first steps will be again my attempt to meet representatives of Abkhazia and so-called South Ossetia. It does not mean that I will recognize them or as an independent state, but we will find a way how to begin a negotiation process between me and between them. And concerning domestic policy, of course, many things have been should be changed. First of all, I am sure, absolutely sure, that for further development of the country, it's important restoration of justice, process of restoration of justice. Why? Not because, I'm angry on Saakashvili or somebody else and I want to punish them. No, because for democracy, it's very important when in the country rule of law really exists. And rule of law means that if president was guilty, he should be punished. If just ordinary citizen was guilty, should be punished. And everybody should be equal in front of the law. And in once and forever, in Georgia, will create a situation when if I know as a president or as a speaker of the parliament that I should not do wrong things, otherwise I will answer tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, it will change Georgian reality absolutely fully. It will have an attempt and results on corruption. It will have serious results on many different fields of life. And of course, one of the biggest priority will be economic and social situation in the country. I want to see Georgia as a social country which will give the protection, elementary protection to his own citizens. And we need to be, we don't want to be dependent only from Western help. We need to have a serious improvement of economic situation situation and investment climate in Georgia, and we want to really strengthen Georgian economy, Georgian agriculture sector, and to give to the people more possibilities to work, because the level of unemployment in Georgia is really very high.
Is there any chance that Georgia could play an independent role in the international arena?
You know, my position is concerning me and my party and concerning Georgia. Georgia should not be pro-Western and Georgia should not be pro-Russian. Georgia should be pro-Georgian. This is simple as that. And for this, it's very important, first of all, to think about your own national interest. You know, when we are speaking, is it possible for small Georgia to play independent role or not? In 21st century, nobody is independent 100%. Everything in globalization process so linked with each other, and you can't be independent 100%, but you can be independent in these frames, which is necessary for sovereignty, territorial integrity, and democratization process in Georgia. I think the biggest mistake of Georgian politician is that Georgia decided to be, I think, the strongest ally of United States and maybe some other NATO countries. This was very, very serious mistake. When you are in this geographical situation when we are, you should not forget that you have in the north a huge superpower which has very serious interest. And I think that if Georgia will respect and will try to take into account Russia's legal interests. I want to stress these words, legal interests. In this case, it will be much more easy to play really independent role, but not to be pro-Western, or maybe more correct to say pro-American, and not to be pro-Russian. Be pro-Georgian.
He has now been stripped of his Ukrainian citizenship. Do you think, or what do you think rather, caused his fall from grace in such a short period of time?
By the way, he is really uncomfortable for the leaders in Ukraine, because country is really corrupted, country is really in trouble, and in opposition, and being in opposition, Saakashvili, of course, quite strong. So I think that he created some kind of threat for today's Ukrainian leadership, or maybe he received some kind of instructions, because I'm absolutely sure that he is a part of some kind of program, what should be done in Ukraine. So he is continuing everything the same what he was doing in Georgia. And of course, again, he could be used from the different forces from the side of West, because they again want to use Ukraine as anti-Russian card in the world political game. Immediately when Saakashvili lost the citizenship of Ukraine, he was in CNN and in BBC and other international media, and all these interviews, the people begin from the words that biggest fighter against Putin, biggest fighter against Russia.
But do you think that Saakashvili's allies during the time of the war, that they too should bear responsibility for what happened?
You know, nobody shares the responsibility about after August 2008, because it was a general line that nobody is responsible for that, and nobody just paid a price for just beginning of war. Nobody paid a price that people were not evacuated on time. Nobody paid a price that Kodori, for example, the part of Georgia was the governmental forces left without even one shooting and so on and so on. There was no investigation. So it means that nobody responded for what happened in 2008 from the side of Georgian political elite.
Well, when the Georgian Dream, the ruling party, when they came to power, they talked about repairing relations with Russia. Have they done anything in that direction?
No, nothing serious. Yes, there are some talks concerning just flights concerning Georgian wine or some agriculture products, but this is not important. What is important to have real serious political dialogue. This is very important. And if you remember, President Putin suggested 3 times that he is ready to meet high-level Georgian officials, president or prime minister, and answer was absolutely tragic. Answer from the side of president was, I will ask my Western colleagues and then I decide to meet Putin or not. This is a tragedy for the country. This means that Georgia is losing its independence. If your president, your prime minister asking permission from the side of US embassy to meet Putin or not, how can we speak about some serious dialogue between these 2 countries? So I can blame Georgian Dream that they lost, let's say, 5 golden years for solving the many problems which exist in front of my country, and they really lose this possibility to speak with Russian president. They did not use it.
You now have 2 areas of Georgia that have independently been building their own states, their own nations for the past 9 years, arguably much longer. How do you begin to fix the situation? How do you begin to de-escalate and, as you say, unify?
You know, first of all, I would like to stress it very seriously that Georgian and Abkhaz and Georgian Ossetians, we have centuries of history of friendship. And I'm sure that these centuries means a lot. But what is very important is that we should not forget that the pain right now which exists after these tragic events in Abkhazia and so-called South Ossetia, this pain is very strong. But we have to begin to speak with these people. We have to rebuild these bridges which existed during many centuries, and we have to ensure them that being a part of United Georgia will be much more safe and more comfortable for them than to be just separated from the western part of Georgia. And these people should have absolutely 100% insurance that nobody in the future will repeat the same what Saakashvili did or what happened in early 90s. This is very important. Of course, I am not naive, and I understand that it will be quite difficult and it's need a lot of time. But I'm sure that if from one side we will begin a direct dialogue with Abkhaz and Ossetians, and from another side we will find a solution in our relations with Russia, this could be possible. But the problem is just Georgian government is losing time, and the time is not working for Georgians. And the situation when we are not using the possibility to have direct dialogue with Russia, it's creating more and more problems on the way of unification, and this is a problem.
Is there any chance, a possibility, that Georgia would recognize Abkhazia and South Ossetia as sovereign states?
For me, no. I will never recognize Abkhazia and so-called South Ossetia as an independent state. And I think if any Georgian politician will do this, he will leave the office very, very soon, because despite of the problems, despite of the difficulties which exist in Georgian society, despite of the fact that sometimes there are some just positions when people are really really tired because of difficult social and economic life, if you will look very deeply, you will see that for every Georgian and for everybody, Abkhazia and South Ossetia and unification of the country is very important.
Well, just before hostilities broke out, you...
Unfortunately, despite of very provocative actions from the side of Saakashvili many times, Russia used this, and Russian intervention had a place in 2008, and Russia brought Russian military bases back in Georgia, in South Ossetia and Abkhazia, and even still there is a so-called borderization process in the middle of Georgia, which is very painful. But nevertheless, nobody wants to show pictures from two different sides, from what was the fall of Georgian leadership and what Russia made, and how Russia used these unclever and tragic steps made from the side of Saakashvili. Of course, it's very comfortable for Western politicians and for Western media to use this to show Russia in only negative light.
Well, there's a report by a Swiss diplomat, Heidi Tagliavini, where she says that then President Mikhail Saakashvili started the conflict and used against civilians forbidden weapons, including cluster munitions, during his bombing of Tsinkwali. Why hasn't he been prosecuted?
You know, I think it was a political decision of Georgian government, and not only of Georgian government, but from the side of some forces in the West, especially in United States, who supported maybe Saakashvili during his actions in 2008. And even more, sometimes I have a feeling that despite of official position of the United States high officials, there were some very strong forces who maybe just were trying to force Saakashvili or to provoke Saakashvili to begin this war in 2008. You remember that it was a pre-election period in United States, and it was very useful for some aggressive forces in U.S. to use against anti-Russian card in their activity. From another side, of course, I had a feeling, and I had a big hope in 2012 when Georgian Dream came into the power, that they will investigate not only 2008 but other crimes of President Saakashvili and his team, and they will prosecute him, and it might be a very serious step even for solution of relations between Georgians and Ossetians. But I saw that nobody wants a restoration of justice. Nobody wants really to open the files which will show what Saakashvili was doing during his presidency in reality. Maybe it was some kind of pressure from the side of United States. Yes, it was some pressure, but I'm sure that having a real investigation, having a serious investigation, might give us some possibility even for Georgian Dream to show everything to the Western representatives, and to say that you should not protect the person who is doing things like that.
Well, on the topic of Saakashvili's potential return, you resigned temporarily, you paused your political career exactly just before the conflict broke out. Why is that?
Yeah, because, you know, I saw that Saakashvili is driving country in wrong direction. After a crisis in 2007 and the second elections of Saakashvili, he promised to me that he will change his policy, he will change his internal and international policy, that he will respect democratic values much more than because he was just really violating democratic values very seriously in the country. He promised to me means that he will change his position with Russia and with the conflict regions, and he will begin the negotiation process. But I remember quite well April 2008, when we were very near to the war in Abkhazia, and I saw what Saakashvili doing. I saw what the people around him were doing, and what kind of advices they were giving to Saakashvili. I saw that, unfortunately, I will have any kind of mechanisms to avoid very serious problems for the country in the future. And of course, I said to Saakashvili, either you are just doing what you promised, or I will leave, because I don't want to be a part of this process which is bringing my country in absolutely wrong direction and to the very serious problems. That was why I decided to leave.
Well, eventually you came back and you founded the Democratic Movement United Georgia Party. What motivated you to come back?
Only war, because before war I had a very strong decision made for myself that at least few years I will not, I will continue to be somehow out from the political life of Georgia, and I will try I wanted to see what is going on a little bit from the side, to understand the situation, maybe from more just from the side. But when war had place, when happened what happened in 2008, and especially when I saw the reaction of Saakashvili, who was celebrating so-called victory in 2008, when I saw absolutely inadequate reaction from the side of political forces and unfortunately from the side of big part of society, I understood that I have no right to stand on the side. I have obligation in front of my people and even in front of these people who don't understand this and blaming me as a traitor. I have an obligation in front of future generations to do something to change the situation and to survive the country.
During the last elections, you didn't gain any seats, your party didn't gain any seats, while Mikhail Saakashvili's United National Movement gained almost a third of the seats in parliament. Why is that? Are the ideas and the beliefs of Mikhail Saakashvili and his party still popular?
In some part of population, unfortunately, yes, because during these 9 years when Saakashvili was in the power, he was able, using media and using TV, somehow to change the people's mind and views, and it was a
Today is the 9th anniversary of the beginning of the South Ossetian War. How would you say the events, that war and the conflict are viewed today?
First of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you and to express my views concerning Georgian reality. I would like to mention that even in 2008, I saw how deep and serious results could bring for Georgia events which had place in South Ossetia and this tragic war. But unfortunately, even that time, people did not understand this, and we remember celebration of the victory. And I would like to say that right now some people in Georgia don't understand reality quite well. They are living under illusion. But I see that after these years after war, situation concerning territorial integrity and situation concerning conflict solution is worse and worse. And I'm very much disappointed that these years Georgia didn't use for solving the problems, just opposite. Many politicians, they are closing eyes on the reality of the problems. Unfortunately, I would like to mention that this tragic 2008 brings so serious problems for Georgia that we can't just create a better possibility for Georgia future.
Would you say that the Georgian media provides fair and balanced coverage of those events?
No, absolutely not. Of course, it's a little bit more maybe fair than it was during Saakashvili national movement. But nevertheless, I didn't see any realistic investigations, journalist investigation in media, or even some attempts to show pictures from different sides. And for example, when I mentioned that the main problem was that Saakashvili began a war, and Saakashvili was a person who is most responsible in these tragic events, I was declared as just enemy of the country by all medias and all media representatives. And even right now, despite of investigation made by European Union, despite of Tagliavini's declaration, despite of the things that everybody knows what really happened, to say that Saakashvili began the war, this is very uncomfortable in Georgia, and nobody wants to stress it and to say this.
And what about the Western media? Do you think that their coverage provides a fair and balanced view on the events of 2008? Do viewers in the West have a more fair, view of what's going on?
No, because the main problem here is another side is the Russia Federation, and right now it's a trend everywhere in the world to blame Russia in everything what Russia made and what Russia did not make. So of course.